Power to weight, a simple but very important ratio. Simply put, how much power can you produce for every kilo of your body weight? Since forever, it's been considered to be the gold standard of cycling performance. Because every time you go uphill, it's the main determinant of your speed. And then when you look at that over the course of a whole ride, it will really add up. So we all want to improve it, from beginner cyclist through to Tour de France champion. Now, on the one hand, improving your power to weight ratio is straightforward. Get more powerful, get lighter, or both. But on the other hand, it's not just a ratio, it's a balance. And the stronger you are and the lighter you are, the more delicate that balance becomes, with not just your cycling performance, but potentially even your health on the line. Fear not though, because that is only when you take it to extremes. In this video though, we're going to give you some sound advice. We're going to cover the basics and also dive a little bit deeper, and it won't come from me. To find out, I've come to meet up with Oli Beckingsale, a pro cyclist of 16 years who had an insanely good power to weight ratio and who is now a top coach. More than that though, Oli is the most common sense individual I have ever met. He can cut through any bull, which is quite a skill. And so given that this topic needs some frank and straight answers, who better to ask than Oli? And as well as him, we're also working with TrainingPeaks on this video. It's a platform that I think just about every top coach uses, including Oli. And while there are different ways to plan, record and analyze your training, TrainingPeaks have been the market leader for a long time, hence why we're making this video with them and using their platform to illustrate. However, the tips and advice we're giving don't rely on having a TrainingPeaks account. You go, mate?
Perfect.
Right then, power to weight, okay? Which cyclists need to be concerned about their power to weight ratio?
I would probably say the majority. I think anyone with a cycling goal, and I think that power to weight, especially these days with power meters, it's on screen. I think a lot of people think it's for professionals.
Yeah.
You know, it's what power did he do? Is this achievable, etc., etc. But I think ultimately, if we break it down, that power, threshold power, let's talk about threshold power, that's, you know, FTP, to weight is what's going to help get us up the hills. Whether you're a starter rider, you know, if you're beginning and it's your start point in cycling, the reason why you find hills hard is a lower power to weight. That threshold point, there's numbers of ways that people can describe it, but let's call it FTP.
Yeah.
You know, what we can sustain for 40 minutes or 60 minutes or so. Below that, we're very efficient.
Yeah.
You know, we can use some fat for carbohydrate, we're working predominantly aerobically, and we can sustain that for long periods of time. Once we go over that FTP or into the red and use turbo, it's really inefficient. So as an example, you can hold your FTP power maybe 40, 60 minutes. 10% over that, you're not going to last any longer than, 5 to 7 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go too far over the top. So if your power to weight isn't good enough and you hit a climb that's too steep, you will go into the red, you'll work inefficiently, you'll burn a lot of carbohydrate. So you can't sustain that. You can't do 3, 4, 5 climbs like that. And you're more likely to blow up.
Yeah.
And run out of glycogen. So.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense then. And so for most riders, most objectives on a bike, power to weight then is going to be critical. But I suppose there might still be 1 or 2 people for whom their objective is not as influenced by power to weight.
No,
right?
so if I look at my client, 95% of clients, probably the power to weight is an important factor and something we're working on. I've got one example. What's the guy's goal? It's 10 and 25 mile time trials. So therefore it's flat. He's up at speed. So therefore it's power to drag. Then the aerodynamics kick in. His weight actually isn't really, it's not a factor.
No.
So for him, it doesn't matter if he's, the weight side, a couple of kilos heavier than he could be. The most important thing is power and drag. But for the majority of people, most road cyclists and off-road, cross-country or cyclocross, we've got to get some hills. We need to accelerate, and their power to weight is important.
When you look at the numbers, the physics behind it, on an 8% climb, if you drop 1 kilo in weight, that's equivalent to, in speed rather, increase to improving your power by 7 watts.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, so there's 2 ways of looking at it. How do you approach it?
So, I mean, ideally I'd focus more on the power side. I think that's a safe thing to look at. It's very manageable, you can train towards it. The weight side is a bit more delicate. And a lot of that depends on so many factors. But I think, yeah, so start with power, and then I'd say weight was something we'll look at, I think.
Let's crack on, go for a ride, and let's talk about how to boost power then, shall we?
Power it up, cool.
Right then, Ollie, the $1 million question then, how do you improve your power over those longer durations, like 20 minutes plus?
The key is, I'd probably say, break your body down almost like an engine.
Okay.
So below that threshold FTP, think of that as the size of the engine. On top is your turbo boost.
Okay.
Okay, so we want to increase the size of that engine first of all. So it's longer durations, your zone 2 work, of course.
Yeah.
There's some benefits of that, but really, if we're thinking of really high targeting the longer efforts, zone 3, zone 4, sweet spot.
Okay.
You want to control your breathing. So if you're going to have a conversation like we are now, that's probably a tempo pace, and that's what we're looking to climb at in your longer rides.
Okay. And am I right in thinking as well, to get those meaningful changes, it's about consistency over longer periods of time, like no just kind of get fit quick in a week type thing?
Yeah, I mean, you can get some quick changes, especially for kind of speed efforts, tolerance to harder efforts. But yeah, your engine building, that's weeks, months. We need to count back and slowly incremental increases in duration, but also the amount of climbing in a ride. I wouldn't overthink the intervals of the climb length, just think of adding load. So 20 minutes of tempo climbing, 25, 30, etc., till you've built up to a good volume.
Okay, and how do you measure load then?
So yeah, on TrainingPeaks we could use TSS.
Okay.
That gives a workout a score, so you can compare like with like.
Yeah.
So that's a good indication of how difficult a similar ride was. So that helps. Or just time in zone.
Yeah, okay.
You can go back, look at your times in zones. Are we logging a chunk of, an hour of zone 3, for example, in an endurance ride would be good.
Okay. And what about if, like many of us out there, you don't have long periods of time to train? Like, how do you get a meaningful training load, building that engine in an hour or less?
Yeah, so I think that those tempo blocks, zone 3, sweet spot, very popular, kind of fallen out of favour maybe a little bit, but I think that sort of worked really good.
Okay.
Personally, I use Alp to Zwift.
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic effort. And I think I can do loads of stuff on that. And if I had to sit on a trainer and do one session, I'd probably sit at 90% of my FTP all the way up.
Yeah.
In control. But that's going to be similar to the closest I can get to a hard mountain climb, I'm in and off in an hour.
You've talked about building your engine then for those longer durations, but what about building your turbo then? Firstly, is that important still for people that are looking to do 100 miles and huge mountains? I
mean, it goes back to that shopping list for your event.
Yeah.
And then working out which ones are worth you're going to get your best bang for your buck from. So if someone is doing the Etape de Tour, it's obviously going to be 20-60 minute if we're looking for those metrics. If somebody wants to do any sort of racing, dynamic racing, cyclocross, road, criterium, mountain bike, those 1 and 5 minutes are super important.
Yeah.
Strava KOM, beating your mates.
Yeah.
It's all power to weight over those short periods of time. And then we're talking turbo.
Yeah, okay.
So those harder efforts. Ultimately, if we've got that engine bigger, good chance as well that that's going to push up your overall level and your higher intensities will be better as well. But yeah, no, super important.
Okay, and how do you do it then? How do you build your turbo?
That goes back to your old school intervals again, know, and there's a million ways you can do it, whether it's, the famous, your 40-20 to 20-40, the list is endless. But those sort of sessions will build that tolerance.
Yeah.
And if we're dropping a bit of weight at the same time, obviously that power to weight on those 1 to 5 minute climbs, your race winners really, will improve.
Okay, so a little bit of those like real anaerobic capacity intervals, short, like 1 to 5 minutes?
1 to 5 minutes, those big punchy, your traditional intervals really.
Yeah.
But I mean, out on the open road, you can do them on a trainer, which works really well, but you might pick an hour and a half loop that contains 3 climbs. And you might say, well, actually everyone's going to be a KOM. and really give it a varying length and actually do it real world.
Yeah.
But you're probably thinking, if you're designing an average week for an average guy, 1-2 of those sessions a week. And then the others would be, more the engine building we were talking about before.
And what about using coaching then as a way of helping to improve your power to weight ratio? Obviously, it doesn't literally improve it.
Yeah.
But what are the advantages? And I guess we've got to say you are a coach now, but as a rider, you were both coached and self-coached during your career.
Yeah, I think from both sides, I've got a wide range of people. People think that coaching is just for elite athletes.
Yeah.
But I'd see it a different way. It's more for anyone looking to achieve a goal.
Okay.
So if you want to achieve a goal, best way of doing it, we talked about consistent training.
Yeah.
You need to be motivated.
Yeah.
And you want to get the best out of every session.
Yeah.
So where it probably works even better, you've got, an elite athlete, you're talking about trying to find a percent here or there.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a risk of overtraining because they've got all the time in the world. Probably most of my clients got families, they're very busy, they're limited on time.
Yeah.
So it's trying to chisel out those 4 hours that they've got in a week.
Yeah.
And maximise the benefits. So, if I've got one client, we look at a guy called Ben. He's off to the Alps in July. Very busy guy. So it's trying to, how are we going to increase his 20, 60-minute powers with limited time? And so he knows that when he comes home of that evening, that's the indoor session he's going to do.
Yeah.
On the weekend, we're aiming for this. And it kind of, he can delegate that to me.
Yeah.
He's accountable to me.
Yes.
And I think ultimately, there's a better chance of the training being successful that way. That's the nuts and bolts of it.
And I mean, it is a big outlay financially, isn't it? And so it's not essential, but I mean, on the spectrum of investments you can make as a bike rider to improve your performance, where would you put it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic one. You could say, well, I could buy those new set of wheels for $1,000 for my trip to the Alps, so I could get a coach for a year or 6 months, And I think you'll probably get, I'd like to think, if it works well, you'll climb faster. You might not have that shiny, bike to purr at in the garage, but depends what you're after. I mean, some people, they don't like the structure, so they don't want coaching. It's too stressful. That's a downside to it. You are accountable. And if you don't do the sessions, that can be a bit stressful and kind of ruins the enjoyment of it.
Yeah.
So some people will just use it for a patch.
Yeah.
3-4 months, whether it's coaching or even an individual self-coaching.
Yeah.
And putting their head down saying, right, 4 months, I'm going to go for it. That's long enough to get a good response.
So we've talked now about improving power at longer durations. We've talked about improving power at short durations. The other side of the equation then is weight. So in your mind, what's the best way of approaching it?
We can't ignore weight.
No.
It's really important. So I think I when I'm working with guys, I almost think there's kind of 4 levels I put it into.
Okay.
So it's very simply put, level 1 is your first chance of losing a little bit of weight.
Yeah.
So that one is just cut out the crap.
Okay.
So there's some things in life that we know aren't really doing us any good. Booze, heavily processed food. We know that they're going to give us more spikes, they're going to put on weight, they're empty calories, etc., etc. If we consistently cut those out of our diet, we're likely to lose a little bit of weight. And when we're saying power to weight, we're probably talking for most people, 1 kilo, 2 kilos is still going to make quite a sizable difference.
Yeah.
That kind of next level up from that is then looking at the quality of the food.
Okay.
So you've cut the crap bit out. What's looking at the stuff that's on our plates on a meal by meal basis? Swapping, for example, white rice to brown rice, more vegetables, more fruit, some good protein. So just looking at good quality. We're not talking about portion sizes or anything like that. It's just, let's think about good quality food.
Okay.
Level 3, this is when I start thinking that actually it's beyond my scope and you're starting to get into the portion sizes, having less food on rest days, more food on higher intensity days, less carbs, all that sort of stuff. That's getting a bit heavy.
Yeah.
That's at level 3. Level 4, we're talking about really paring things down. That's the Tour de France working one-on-one. How many calories are you burning on a ride? and matching that with how many calories somebody's eating. That's that real higher level. But I think a lot of people, if we look at level 1 and 2, they can do those quite easily for a period of time, lose a little bit of weight, combine with an increase in power, and they're going to climb faster.
Right then, we've got a laptop in front of us now. So a lot of those points that we were talking about earlier, you can now illustrate for us on the TrainingPeaks dashboard here. Yeah. So first of all, that power profile as well. So what does that look like in real life?
So one of my clients, Ben, he's a typical client of mine, kind of mid-40s, bit of cyclocross in the winter, but his big goal coming up, he's going to be looking at getting around the Alps for a week with some mates. So in terms of previous feature on TrainingPeaks was a power curve, and you're looking at the main metrics we talked about before. So if we're looking at their PB for 5 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes, 20 minute, and 60 minute, it will rank those almost in a classification. So it's got some sort of comparison with what is untrained all the way up to what is world class. And then recently TrainingPeaks added a stack up feature, which will then show that really a bit more personal. So more against similar people, similar age, similar categories, and a bit more day by day.
So like maybe more of like a motivational tool then, so that you can see your progress basically. You can see it out on the road, but actually you can also see yourself improving against
and I think
people.
The big things we talked about before is consistency, and to get consistency it needs to be achievable and you need to be motivated. So partly it's finding out, well actually if I was in the top 20% in my 20-minute power, those are probably the most important metrics, and I can get that up to the top 15% in my age group, well obviously that's a really good aim. And it's finding these little aims and goals, and a personal one like that could be perfect, and almost a stepping stone before someone like Ben got to the Alps.
And you can do it based on purely power, right? And then also power to weight.
Exactly, which is the key one. For someone like Ben, he's a bigger guy, so therefore having just running it on power isn't, he's going to be at the top end, but power to weight is the more applicable.
Okay, cool. And then also I can see on the screen now, so performance management. And so this, I guess, is illustrating that point of consistency over time. Right?
So it's we talked about how we're monitoring sessions using TSS, which kind of is giving each workout a score. So you can compare like with like. This one's taking it one step further. So it's looking at, again, the key thing is consistency. And this is with your fitness, it's looking at your training load averaged over 42 days. So it's really looking at that consistency that I'm keen on. Okay,
so this one here then is the fatigue.
Fatigue, which is the pink one. And then your form, which is the yellow one. So you can see that there was an overload of cycling this week. So I think that was a festive 500 week. I pushed up the TSS. We got a couple of outliers here, really hard rides.
So he's more tired.
More tired.
And therefore he's got less form.
Because he's fatigued.
So does this show progression then of your fitness, or is it just monitoring the training that you're doing?
In terms of its monitoring training, if we get this right, there should, in theory, if we've done all our jobs right, there should be an increase in power, however we're monitoring that. If in this case, let's look at FTP. If we get this right, there's a good chance that FTP will also be higher as well. And if we're looking at power to weight, if we've monitored that and it's been consistent drop, obviously that power to weight was going to go through the roof.
So this is your tool, either coach or rider, just to make sure that you're training optimally. And then actually you then sort of cross-reference it from time to time, looking at like your power curve and then
we could be monitoring this one. This is kind of the overview, and you can see the woods from the trees. Day by day, has someone been sick? Is the weather bad? We just had an icy patch. Is it icy? Have they been sick? What's work going on? That's the kind of day by day. And you can be caught up, well, how are we going to fit these sessions in this week to achieve your goal? Whereas this one is kind of, let's step back a little bit and are we on track? And that's the key about monitoring and monitoring your metrics. And we're flooded with metrics these days, but it's getting the key ones, monitoring them over time to get that consistent, whether that's a drop in weight or an increase in power or fitness.
Lots to digest there, isn't there? For me, the big take-homes are that there are no quick wins when it comes to improving power to weight ratio. should be a medium to long-term objective. And as Oli kept reiterating, consistency is absolutely key, both on the improving power side and also the weight loss side as well. And then for the majority of bike riders, focusing in your training on those intensities that are lower than FTP to build your engine as opposed to fine-tuning your turbo. And then keeping a track, building up those durations and volumes over time to get a nice steady progression. And then I think having things that motivate you in your training, and potentially, as we touched on with the coaching, have someone to hold you to account as well, so that you can reach those longer term targets. Now I've got to say huge thanks to Oli for his time and giving us his straight up no nonsense advice as well. If you're interested in what we've been talking about over on TrainingPeaks, go take a look. We've got some GCN training plans on there that have been put together by Mark Beaumont's coach, and so that it's not one-on-one coaching, but you can follow along and get all the benefits of TrainingPeaks. So do go and have a look if you're interested. Otherwise, last thing to say as always, if you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a big thumbs up.